My friends, there is a kind of warfare that does not sound with the clash of swords, nor blaze with the flash of fire. It moves in quiet corridors of thought, an unseen conflict of observation and influence. There are spirits whose greatest strength lies not in assault, but in attention. They are the watchers, the ones who monitor. Evil seldom begins with thunder. It is not the spectacle of chaos that most endangers the soul, but the quiet, invisible attention that precedes it. There are forces that do not strike immediately but observe. They watch how you think, how you react, how you wound, and how you heal. They measure your weaknesses like a hunter studying the movement of prey before the chase. These are not the kind of spirits that rage or roar. They are patient, deliberate, intelligent in their malice. Their power lies not in their strength, but in their silence. Such watchers are ancient, older than the languages that describe them. They know human nature not from books or philosophies, but from millennia of careful observation. They understand that humanity is most vulnerable not in crisis, but in comfort. When life grows predictable, when routines dull the vigilance of the heart, the unseen watchers lean in close. They study your habits, your desires, your fears. They learn the specific rhythm of your weakness, the hour of the day when your faith wanes, the kind of thought that most easily distracts you, the memory that most often reopens old wounds. Their gaze is not always hostile at first. It is curious. They wish to know what kind of soul you are, what makes you tremble, what makes you proud, what makes you question your worth. They will not interfere until they are certain that their interference will be effective. That is why some people feel untouched for years, and then suddenly overwhelmed, because the watchers have finished their study. They strike only when the pattern is clear. They prefer, whenever possible, to remain unseen, for awareness ruins their craft. The moment you recognize that you are being watched, you begin to guard your thoughts, and that spoils their advantage. They thrive on the illusion that what happens within you is private, that your struggles exist only in your own imagination. But the truth is far more unsettling. There are entities that learn you from the inside out, who gather fragments of your inner life to build a map of your spirit. This is why secrecy is their chosen environment. They thrive in corners of silence, the things you never confess, the thoughts you never challenge, the wounds you never allow to heal. These are their windows. The more you conceal from the light, the clearer their view becomes. To them, every unspoken resentment glows like a signal in the dark. Every unrepented habit hums like a frequency. They are drawn to the energy of secrecy, for it mirrors their own nature. And yet their watchfulness is not invincible. It depends entirely on your unawareness. Their observation feeds on your belief that you are unseen, unguarded, alone in your thoughts. Once you begin to perceive the subtlety of their gaze, once you realize that attention itself can be a weapon, their power begins to weaken. They can no longer learn you as they once did. Their study becomes incomplete, their knowledge fragmented, their advantage lost when the soul becomes watchful in return. The most perilous attacks are seldom loud, and the most destructive influences rarely appear monstrous. Evil understands the psychology of disguise. It does not always enter a life through rebellion or blasphemy. It often comes dressed as reason, comfort, or even virtue slightly misplaced. The enemy's true brilliance lies not in force, but in imitation, the ability to twist something true by half a turn, just enough to corrupt its meaning while keeping its appearance intact. Subtlety is the craft of darkness. It knows that the human mind, proud of its logic, is easiest to mislead when it believes itself undeceived. So it whispers not in contradiction to truth, but adjacent to it. It does not say there is no good, but rather good is whatever feels right for you. It does not urge hatred outright, but convinces you to protect your pride under the banner of self-respect. It does not command despair, but persuades you to call hopelessness realism. This is how corruption moves quietly, persuasively, beneath the language of wisdom. The enemy is patient because subtlety requires time. It studies not only what tempts you, but how you justify temptation to yourself. It learns the vocabulary of your conscience and uses it against you. If you are a person who values compassion, it tempts you through pity until you tolerate destruction in the name of kindness. If you are disciplined, it tempts you toward pride in your own orderliness, until structure becomes idolatry. If you are devout, it tempts you toward self-righteousness until faith becomes a weapon instead of a light. In every case, the aim is not to destroy the virtue, but to distort it, to make the good thing slightly self-serving, the holy thing slightly proud, the noble thing slightly cruel. You see, open evil would fail immediately. The human heart, when confronted by what is clearly wicked, recoils instinctively. The subtle enemy knows this, and so it hides within what seems familiar, respectable, even admirable. It persuades you to redefine truth rather than reject it. It convinces you that holiness is a matter of mood, that conviction is arrogance, that purity is outdated. It weaves confusion so finely that you no longer know whether your compromise was an act of mercy or of cowardice. Such deceit seldom arrives in the form of catastrophe. It seeps in through repetition, small permissions, quiet alterations, almost invisible adjustments of conscience. One thought here, one indulgence there, and soon the boundary between good and evil becomes blurred. Not because truth has changed, but because your sensitivity to it has been gently numbed. By the time you realize the shift, the landscape of your heart has already been redrawn. Subtlety also uses familiarity as camouflage. The enemy rarely sends new temptations. He recycles the old ones, dressing them in slightly different garments. He knows that you are least guarded against what feels normal. The same pride you conquered last year returns as confidence. The same envy you once rejected comes back as healthy comparison. The same bitterness you thought buried reemerges as discernment. This is the genius of subtle evil. It evolves just enough to appear harmless while remaining fatally consistent in purpose. And so, the mind becomes its own battlefield. The thoughts that once came from faith are now mixed with ambition. The words that once came from love now carry resentment beneath their polish. The very voice you once trusted as your own begins to echo with undertones that are not entirely yours. Yet you do not resist, because nothing seems wrong. Everything seems almost right. Almost the most dangerous word in all moral vocabulary. The enemy's subtlety works best in the half. Light, not total ignorance, but partial knowledge. It loves the person who knows just enough truth to speak of it, but not enough to live by it fully. It delights in the kind of believer who quotes wisdom without understanding its weight, who prays without surrender, who confesses sin, but keeps its seed alive in secret admiration. For such a soul is both confident and careless, and therefore easy to steer with the faintest touch. It is not through storms that subtle evil gains dominion, but through whispers that sound like your own thoughts, through desires that seem too small to be dangerous, through compromises so gentle that they feel like growth. The enemy's method is not to overthrow, but to suggest, not to frighten, but to persuade, not to command, but to imitate. Every human soul possesses a kind of spiritual architecture, invisible walls, thresholds, and entryways through which influence can flow. Some of these doors are meant to remain open: humility, gratitude, compassion, love. These allow the divine presence to move freely within the heart. Yet there are other doors that, once opened, become dangerous corridors for darker things. These are not physical gates, but conditions of the spirit: fear, pride, bitterness, envy, deceit, and secret sin. Each one, when left unguarded, becomes an invitation written in the language of the unseen. Evil does not force its way into the human heart. It waits for permission disguised as emotion. Fear, for instance, is not merely a feeling. It is a signal that faith has been momentarily displaced. Fear tells the enemy that you have forgotten who protects you. It exposes the soul like a light flickering in a storm, revealing the places where trust has thinned. When fear becomes habitual, it ceases to be a reaction and becomes a residence, a doorway that swings open each time uncertainty knocks. Through it, anxiety walks in and brings with it suspicion, restlessness, and despair. Then there is pride, the most ornate of all doorways. It rarely looks dangerous because it often wears the mask of confidence or dignity. Yet pride is the declaration that one's own wisdom is sufficient, that one's own strength can manage what only grace was meant to sustain. The proud heart stands at the threshold and says, "I can handle this." That single sentence becomes a key turned from the inside. Pride invites the unseen watchers by removing dependence on light. It convinces the soul that it can see clearly even as shadows gather around it. Bitterness opens another gate, perhaps the most corrosive one. It does not need grand betrayal to begin. It needs only a small wound left untended. The bitterness festers quietly, feeding on repetition. Every time the memory is revisited, the door swings a little wider. The watchers learn your pain by studying your reactions to it. They whisper that you deserve vindication, that forgiveness is weakness, and while you nod in agreement, the wound deepens. Bitterness alters the atmosphere of the heart, filling it with a heaviness that repels joy and attracts every thought that confirms its grievance. Secret sin is the most treacherous entrance of all. It is the door you convince yourself does not exist. It thrives on privacy and rationalization. It says no one will know, forgetting that the unseen world always observes. Every secret indulgence leaves a scent, a trail of spiritual vulnerability. The danger is not only in the act itself, but in the hiddenness of it. Secrecy becomes an altar where truth is slowly sacrificed for convenience. The longer it remains unconfessed, the more familiar the darkness feels. Even the subtler emotions, envy, resentment, cynicism, are doors in miniature. They seem too small to matter, yet each forms a crack through which influence seeps. The enemy rarely needs a grand portal. A single unchecked thought can serve as passage enough. The soul that neglects to guard its small gates will soon find the larger ones under siege. And yet, these doors are not flung open by accident. They respond to agreement. Every time you agree with a lie that you are unloved, that you are powerless, that your anger is justified, that your guilt is too great to forgive, a hinge turns. Evil cannot create access. It can only exploit consent. The unseen monitors wait not for opportunity, but for alignment. They listen for the echoes of doubt that tell them which gate to approach. It is a tragic irony that many open these doors in pursuit of control. Fear seeks safety. Pride seeks recognition. Bitterness seeks justice. Secret sin seeks comfort. Each begins as a human attempt to manage pain, to assert meaning in chaos. Yet in doing so, the soul unknowingly writes an invitation not to peace, but to invasion. The watchers do not rush in immediately. They linger at the threshold, observing the habit, testing the endurance of the opening. The longer the door remains ajar, the more accustomed the spirit becomes to the draught that passes through it. There are souls who grow so used to this chill that they forget it was not always there. They learn to live with unease, to normalize the presence of heaviness. They mistake the absence of light for maturity, calling numbness peace and disconnection strength. The open doors become part of the architecture, unseen but constantly influencing the air they breathe, the words they speak, the choices they make among all the territories where the unseen conflict unfolds, none is more contested than the human mind. Attention, that quiet, continuous current of thought and focus, is the true battlefield. What you give your attention to, you empower. Every fear, desire, conviction, and distraction competes for this single, priceless currency. The unseen adversaries understand this better than most people ever will. They know that to command your attention is to guide your destiny. They do not need to destroy you if they can keep you perpetually distracted from the truth that sustains you. In the modern world, distraction has become almost indistinguishable from living. The noise of information, the endless invitations to outrage, entertainment, comparison, and self-analysis, all these form the smoke and confusion of a battlefield. The watchers have learned that they do not need to whisper temptations when they can simply flood your senses with noise. The soul that cannot sit in silence cannot hear the voice of truth. The enemy delights in a mind that is busy but barren, constantly stimulated, yet spiritually empty. Attention is a sacred power. It is the lamp of the soul, illuminating whatever it rests upon. When directed toward gratitude, it deepens peace. When fixed on resentment, it magnifies pain. The unseen know this law well. They maneuver not by force but by suggestion, small nudges of curiosity, irritation, or anxiety that shift your gaze a few degrees off the divine center. Just a few degrees are enough, for once your focus is altered, your path will gradually curve away from its rightful course. They understand that whoever owns the gaze owns the journey. Their strategy is not to fill the mind with evil, but to fill it with everything. An overloaded mind cannot discern. A cluttered heart cannot choose wisely. The enemy uses excess as camouflage. He places trivialities beside eternal things until the weight of both feels equal. He teaches the soul to treat every thought as urgent, every opinion as sacred, every notification as a call to arms. Thus the sacred becomes mundane, and the mundane becomes consuming. The spirit grows weary not from sin, but from scatter. One of the oldest tactics of these unseen forces is substitution, offering a lesser good in place of a greater one. They will gladly let you pursue kindness as long as it distracts you from holiness. They will let you serve endlessly, provided you forget to commune. They will let you speak about love, provided you never practice forgiveness. These substitutions feel harmless, even noble, but they subtly reorder your priorities until your inner compass points to busyness instead of truth. It is a masterstroke of warfare to win by overoccupation rather than invasion. The battle of attention also manifests through memory. The watchers understand that to keep you chained to the past is to prevent you from living in the present. They replay old scenes, failures, humiliations, betrayals, not because they enjoy your pain, but because pain makes excellent distraction. A wounded memory demands constant attention. It draws the focus inward, away from purpose. The enemy whispers not only through temptation, but through remembrance. Look what was done to you. Look what you lost. Look what you might have been. Each recollection, when indulged, drains a measure of strength meant for the day at hand. Equally dangerous is the tyranny of the future. Worry, that subtle anticipation of trouble, keeps the mind orbiting imaginary catastrophes. The enemy cannot truly predict what lies ahead, but he can ensure you are too preoccupied to meet it with faith. A worried soul is divided, living partly in a day that has not yet arrived. Every moment of attention lost to anxiety weakens your capacity for obedience in the present. Thus, the battle is not fought in spectacular crises, but in the quiet misdirection of thought. The small choices of what to dwell upon, what to repeat, what to ignore. Even good things can become weapons when they occupy attention excessively. Devotion becomes superstition when it is performed without awareness. Study becomes vanity when pursued for reputation. Even prayer can become mechanical, a ritual of words emptied of heart. The enemy's aim is not to stop you from doing what is good, but to make you do it unthinkingly. He seeks to separate the action from the awareness, the gesture from the gaze. Once attention is fractured, even holy practices lose their potency. In this unseen war, the first victory of the enemy is to convince you that no battle exists. He will tell you that distraction is harmless, that your scattered mind is simply the product of busy life. He will say that divided focus is normal, that no one can truly live in peace. And while you agree, the territory of your mind is quietly occupied. The more your attention fragments, the weaker your discernment becomes. What once disturbed you now feels ordinary. What once inspired awe now feels irrelevant. The light that once burned brightly begins to flicker, not because it was extinguished, but because it was never given steady fuel. Attention, then, is both weapon and shield. The soul that learns to direct it consciously becomes untouchable in ways no charm or ritual can achieve. But few realize that every distraction is a kind of spiritual exchange, a trade of presence for absence, of awareness for emptiness. The watchers know this perfectly. They study your habits of focus, your moments of boredom, your cravings for novelty. They wait for the instant when your attention drifts, when your eyes grow restless, when your silence becomes uncomfortable, and in that fragile moment of vacancy, they begin their work. Awareness is the lamp of the soul, a steady flame that exposes what hides in shadow and reveals what quietly influences the heart. It is not the same as knowledge, for knowledge collects facts, but awareness perceives meaning. Knowledge may fill the mind, but awareness awakens it. In the unseen conflict, awareness is not merely an advantage, it is survival. For the watchers and whisperers of darkness thrive on ignorance. They feed on the assumption that nothing invisible exists, that every unease is psychological, every temptation coincidental, every heaviness without cause. The less one believes in the unseen, the more exposed one becomes to its operations. Awareness begins when the soul learns to pause, not to analyze everything, but to discern the unseen texture of moments. There are movements beneath our thoughts, currents within emotions, impulses that seem natural but have sources beyond mere habit. The unawakened person rushes through them, explaining them away with the language of logic. The awakened person watches, listens, and asks, "Where did this come from?" That single question weakens the grip of deception, for evil's first victory is to go unnoticed. The second is to be named harmless. Awareness strips both illusions bare. The power of awareness is quiet yet formidable because it restores ownership of the inner life. Most people live at the surface of themselves, tossed by feelings, distracted by impulses, swept by moods they never question. They confuse reaction with personality, emotion with truth, and desire with direction. The unseen world exploits this confusion. It sends whispers in the tone of your own thoughts, suggestions that feel self-originated. But the moment you become aware, when you pause to observe the whisper rather than obey it, a great reversal occurs. You become the watcher, and the unseen watcher loses power. Awareness is not paranoia. It is perception without fear. Paranoia suspects everything and trusts nothing. Awareness distinguishes what is of light and what is of shadow by the resonance it leaves behind. A thought born of truth will bring calm even when it challenges you. A thought born of darkness will bring agitation even when it flatters you. Awareness recognizes this difference instinctively. like the ear that can tell whether a note is in tune. That is why the unseen enemies labor to keep your mind noisy. They fear silence, for silence heightens awareness. A still mind becomes reflective like a clear pool, and in that reflection truth becomes visible. To be aware is also to be awake to patterns, the repetitions that reveal the hand behind the scene. There are moments in life when the same kind of discouragement returns again and again, when the same argument repeats with uncanny familiarity, when opportunities for peace always collapse at the same emotional trigger. These are not coincidences. They are footprints of interference. Awareness notices such patterns without melodrama. It does not cry, "Everything is cursed," but calmly discerns, "Something is feeding on this." Awareness, therefore, is diagnosis before defense. One cannot resist what one refuses to recognize. The subtle powers that monitor and influence depend upon reaction. They do not create energy, they redirect it. Awareness deprives them of that leverage. When you become conscious of their tactics, when you see the whisper forming before it lands, you rob it of momentum. The temptation loses its illusion of inevitability. The fear loses its grip. The watchers can still observe, but they can no longer steer. Awareness is therefore not passive seeing. It is active sovereignty over one's interior world. In its mature form, awareness becomes a kind of light that radiates outward. It not only defends the soul, but transforms the atmosphere around it. A truly aware person changes a room simply by entering it, not through charisma, but through presence. The energy of alert stillness unsettles what is false. Those driven by deceit or agitation find themselves uneasy in such company without understanding why. Awareness carries its own authority because it aligns with truth, and truth always carries quiet power. The cultivation of awareness, however, requires a willingness to see what one would rather ignore. Many avoid stillness because they fear what it might reveal. The noise of constant activity serves as camouflage for the unresolved. But until the soul dares to face its own shadows, it cannot distinguish between its own voice and the whisper of something foreign. Awareness demands courage, the courage to witness your own motives, to question your own reactions, to admit that not all thoughts wearing your tone belong to you. That humility is the beginning of discernment. Awareness also heals the fragmentation that distraction produces. The divided mind is easy to manipulate because its focus splinters across too many directions. The aware mind gathers itself inward, like light through a lens. It knows when to withdraw from noise, when to speak, when to listen, when to rest. It does not rush because it perceives the pace of truth, steady, deliberate, unhurried. Awareness does not compete for attention. It commands it naturally. In its presence, deception finds no foothold because deception depends on haste. It must strike before the mind looks closely. Awareness slows perception until every illusion reveals its seams. In the unseen realm, awareness functions as illumination rather than armor. It does not fight by striking, but by revealing. Darkness cannot coexist with what is seen clearly. Every false thought, once named, begins to dissolve. Every manipulation, once recognized, begins to lose its power. The unseen adversaries cannot attack what is fully exposed to awareness. They require secrecy, confusion, and impulse. To live with awareness is therefore to live uninteresting to them, for there is nothing they can exploit in a mind that sees. Awareness also aligns perception with gratitude. To see clearly is to appreciate rightly. When the eyes of the soul are open, even ordinary moments shimmer with divine meaning. The unseen loses its grip not through violence but through wonder. Gratitude and awareness are companions. One perceives the truth, the other celebrates it. The person who walks in that state becomes less reactive, less predictable, less easy to manipulate. The watchers find no rhythm to exploit, for such a soul no longer moves by reflex but by revelation. And so, the power of awareness is not in confrontation, but in comprehension. It does not chase shadows, it understands them. It does not wrestle endlessly with lies, it outshines them by recognizing their nature. When the soul is awake, deception grows weary, temptation grows ineffective, and fear grows silent. The unseen conflict continues, but the battleground shifts from confusion to clarity, from blindness to vision, from reaction to understanding. Light is not merely the opposite of darkness. It is its undoing. Darkness does not retreat because it wills to, but because it cannot exist where light is present. The victory of the soul is therefore not found in endless struggle against shadows, but in steadfast illumination, in becoming so filled with truth that falsehood has nowhere to attach itself. The unseen adversaries are creatures of concealment. Their strength depends on secrecy. They study, they whisper, they observe, but their gaze falters where light dwells. To live in light is to live beyond their reach, not because one becomes invincible in strength, but because one becomes transparent in spirit. Light is awareness perfected into purity. It is not merely knowing what is true, but aligning one's entire being with that truth. The moment a soul steps fully into light, deception loses its camouflage. Every temptation reveals its true color. Every whisper exposes its motive. Every illusion fractures beneath the weight of clarity. This is why the unseen enemies labor to cloud perception, to keep the mind fogged with guilt, pride, or confusion. They cannot attack what is illuminated, so they aim to dim the lamp that reveals them. To walk in light requires more than moral effort. It requires surrender, the willingness to let truth penetrate even the corners one prefers to ignore. Light is not selective. It does not illuminate only the comfortable spaces. It exposes the forgotten, the repressed, the conveniently explained away. The soul that welcomes such exposure grows freer, not weaker. It is paradoxical but certain. Only what is hidden can be haunted. The fully revealed cannot be possessed. Every confession is therefore an act of warfare. Every honest admission a beam of light cutting through the fog of deception. The light that conquers darkness is not the cold glare of reason alone. It is the warmth of love, love that burns cleanly, without agenda. Love sees without distortion. The unseen adversaries understand doctrine, but do not comprehend love. They can argue with logic, mimic virtue, even imitate faith, but love eludes them, for love is selfless and transparent. Where love dwells, they lose footing, for their nature is built upon division and accusation. A heart filled with love does not need to repel darkness. Its very presence dissolves it. Light also manifests as integrity, the alignment of thought, word, and action. Many people live fragmented lives. What they believe privately differs from what they speak publicly, and what they speak differs again from what they practice. This inner disunity creates shadowed regions within the self. The watchers find access there, feeding upon inconsistency. Integrity closes those cracks. The person who lives truthfully in all dimensions of being leaves no secret corners for deception to inhabit. To live transparently before heaven and man is not naivety. It is spiritual armor of the highest order. Light disciplines perception. It teaches the eyes to distinguish between what merely shines and what truly illuminates. Not all brightness is light. Some is only reflection, glamour without substance. The unseen adversaries specialize in such imitation. They fabricate glimmers of false enlightenment, insights that flatter but do not purify, feelings that excite but do not sustain. The untrained heart mistakes this glitter for revelation and follows it into deeper confusion. True light, however, clarifies rather than excites. It brings peace instead of thrill. It does not seduce the mind with novelty, but steadies it with comprehension. The victory through light is not dramatic. It is gradual, quiet, and relentless. It transforms from within, reshaping perception, memory, and desire. At first, the soul may feel naked under its scrutiny, but soon that nakedness becomes liberation. The masks fall away, and the self that remains is stronger than the shadows ever imagined. The unseen adversaries retreat not because they have been defeated in combat, but because the environment no longer sustains them. Light changes the atmosphere, making it uninhabitable for deception. The discipline of living in light involves constant renewal. Darkness never ceases to whisper at the edges, seeking cracks through fatigue or forgetfulness. The lamp must be tended. Awareness must be refreshed through silence, prayer, reflection, and honesty. The mind, left unattended, gathers dust, small compromises, unnoticed irritations, quiet judgments. These, if not cleansed, thicken into shadow again. Light requires vigilance, not anxiety but attentiveness, the calm readiness to notice when heaviness settles and to open the window before it lingers. Light is also communal. It thrives in shared honesty. When people walk together in truth, their combined illumination dispels deception that might overwhelm an individual alone. The unseen adversaries depend on isolation. They work best when the soul believes itself misunderstood or unworthy of company. Confession, fellowship, and compassion are therefore not merely moral duties but weapons of light. They prevent the slow darkening that secrecy breeds. Every act of genuine connection multiplies illumination, and where light multiplies, darkness divides itself thin. Even memory can be redeemed by light. The past, when left unexamined, becomes a warehouse of shadows, regrets, shame, unresolved griefs. But when light touches memory, the same events that once wounded now instruct. Pain becomes wisdom, loss becomes perspective, and guilt becomes gratitude for redemption. The unseen adversaries who once used those memories as weapons find their tools turned against them. The illuminated past no longer accuses, it testifies. The soul, freed from its own history, walks forward unburdened, leaving no traceable darkness behind. Victory through light is also victory of perception over illusion. The unseen forces often win not by overpowering, but by deceiving. They present a distortion and rely on the mind's cooperation to make it real. Light dismantles this cooperation. It teaches the heart to pause before agreement, to test every appearance by its resonance. Lies vibrate differently than truth. They carry urgency, heat, and demand. Truth is calm, clear, patient. The light-filled soul feels this distinction instinctively, and in recognizing it, breaks the spell of falsehood before it tightens. Light communicates silently. It does not argue with darkness. It simply shines. The wise do not shout against shadows. They kindle lamps. Every act of kindness, every honest word, every quiet forgiveness increases light. The unseen adversaries who thrive on conflict and accusation find themselves disarmed in its presence. They cannot inhabit what is radiant with gentleness. Thus, the ultimate strategy of evil to provoke reaction fails where peace reigns. To remain calm, truthful, and compassionate amid provocation is to wage the highest form of warfare. Light also governs boundaries. It teaches when to engage and when to withdraw. It reveals that not every battle deserves attention and not every whisper deserves reply. The luminous soul wastes no energy proving itself to darkness. It stands firm, clear, untangled. Such composure confuses the watchers. Their power depends on eliciting response, on stirring the waters to see their reflection. When the waters remain still, they see nothing, and that nothing terrifies them. To live in light is to live in reality unblurred by fear or desire. The unseen world still exists, but its influence becomes peripheral, like distant thunder to one standing in sunlight. The soul no longer measures life by resistance, but by radiance. It begins to understand that victory was never about conquest, but about clarity, not about escaping darkness, but about embodying something in which darkness cannot endure. The light-filled life moves quietly, steadily, unobserved by evil, because it offers nothing for evil to hold. It simply continues to shine. The unseen conflict is not fought with swords or incantations, but with vision, the ability to see clearly in a world that thrives on confusion. Monitoring spirits, subtle influences, whispering fears, these are not invincible powers, but parasites of attention. They live where awareness sleeps, where truth is neglected, where the soul hides from its own light. The battle, therefore, is not one of strength, but of alignment. When the soul stands exposed in humility, when the mind refuses to be ruled by distraction, when the heart chooses truth over comfort, the watchers lose their ground. They cannot torment what refuses to conceal itself. They cannot study what remains fully present in the light. The moment a person chooses transparency before heaven, the unseen loses its fascination, its mystery, its authority. Victory does not arrive with thunder, nor with triumphal cries, but with quiet steadiness. It is found in the daily act of remembering what is real, in the discipline of guarding attention, in the courage to remain honest before the truth. The more light one carries, the less there is to fear. For the heart wholly illuminated cannot be monitored, deceived, or bound. It can only shine, and by shining, it ends the power of the shadows that once followed it.